friends, I thought it would be kind of cool to bring in a few of our trusted teammates that have been with Fit for a really long time and just kind of talk about what it was like at Fit when we were starting out, how we got started out, what it was, you know, what the experience was for you guys, and how we kind of got to where we are. So let me introduce, this is David Gasson. Tell them who you are, David, kind of your progression and what number employee you were when you kind of joined.
Yeah, when I joined, I subcontracted for Fit a bit over the summer of 2013, and I came on as a full-time employee in October of that year. I started off as an office administrator. I was the fourth employee at the time. I started that same day with another engineer, so we were 3 and 4. I guess it's debatable which one was the third or which one was the fourth. But I was the first staff member to not be on the engineering side of things.
Yeah.
So my primary responsibilities would have been, again, just anything outside of engineering. So accounting, operations, procurement, you name it. And then obviously supporting the executive team, which was Ephraim and Joel at the time.
Yeah. And now, over time, you're still with the company. You're the oldest employee we have. Most seasoned grandfather.
Oldest is weird, but
not in age, longest tenure. Most tenure.
We should clarify that.
I like that. Yeah. And so Damien Anderson, Damien, you started with the engineer with us. Tell us a little bit how you got started, what you've been doing.
Yeah, so I think what I might have just January 2015, I want to say, and maybe employee number 6 or 7 somewhere in there. And I remember you guys called me. It was late at night too, I feel like, and Ephraim called me. He was very professional right away. Hey, my name's Ephraim. Started telling me about Fit, and then Joel just cut you off right away. Hey man, we want to work with you. And I was kind of surprised. I wasn't asleep yet, but I was kind of like fading that day, and I was like, wow, he's got some energy.
Yeah.
So you guys told me to come and meet you at a gym, which I also thought was bizarre, and we did our first interview at a bar. So to me, I was like, man,
how did we hear about you?
And a former employee, so somebody we're still tight with.
Yeah.
I think he kind of put us on,
put
us together. And yeah, man, when I first met you guys, I thought, I was like, wow, California, they do things differently. Right? Just meet at the gym, interview there. But no, it was good. We started off engineering. Back then we had a lot less training in the beginning. Right now,
we met at the gym because that was our office.
Your other business.
Yeah, that was our office. That was the official office.
The official office, yeah. And then we walked across the street. I don't know if you remember that. It's that bar that had all that amazing
keg and barrel,
different kinds,
keg and bottle.
Yeah, all kinds of rice whiskey, stuff like that. And that's where we did our first interview.
Yeah.
And I was hungry, and you offered me food, but I was like, nah. I was like, just stay focused.
It's a trap.
Just stay focused. Like, that's a trick question. So I didn't have any food. I just had some coffee, and I don't remember the conversation at all. To be honest, I don't remember how it went. But from there we got started. Did the technical interview.
Yeah.
Technical interview for me was like 2 hours. I mean, Mike Curry. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I can say his name.
Yeah, you can drop his name. He was one of our.
He's my boy. We're still cool. But I mean, for 2 hours, just drug me through the mud with technical questions, things that I haven't even used ever since working at Fit. But I think he thought it was important that I know. So,
yeah, we're happy he did.
Yeah. So it was cool. It was a lot of fun. I know it's early days, so yeah.
That's good. Yeah. So we started, just for context, October 2012, and I had been, at the time I started with my business partner, Joel Ritchie. You guys obviously both know him. Joel was the one that helped recruit you, and he was a big part of the company. He's no longer with us. He wanted to exit, do something else, but at the time, before we launched, he was, honestly, he was a big driver for me to kind of like get over the fear of being an entrepreneur. So he was kind of like, hey, why don't you start your own business? And something I always wanted to do. I started thinking about it more, and he was like challenging me to that. So it was neat because I was already in the industry. By the time we launched, which was October, we had probably already been working on it from, I don't know, December, January the previous year. So we had been talking about it, going to the gym together, doing all that kind of thing. I think one of the big drivers for me at the time was working with team members that I liked. So it wasn't that I didn't like who I was working with, but I was kind of working on an island. I had previously worked at an MSP, and I had a really nice team there. They went through acquisitions, things changed, and I really kind of wanted that back. I liked working with Joel. I was like, man, we could impact a lot of lives, impact my life, impact his life, our family's lives, and then impact the lives of anyone working with us, as well as, take care of our customers, impact their lives. So
what was the because, and I remember the dynamic right between you and Joel. And Joel, I felt like was kind of like the marketing, sales, a lot of bravado, a lot of energy.
Yeah.
You were like the quiet workhorse. But can you talk to me a little bit about the way you dealt with the fear versus the way he dealt with it of kind of
Yeah, I don't think he had a lot of fear because he's very visionary. He's like, I say, visionary, and I was more of an implementer. And I think over time I've taken on more of that visionary role. But at the time, he just didn't have fear, and I had a lot more fear because I was, I didn't have any money in the bank. I was like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Like, so I was very calculated to the risk.
Right.
And then the more he was challenging me, like the desire to do it grew. And then I think what got over the fear wasn't necessarily Joel. It was actually two other entrepreneur guys I reached out to, and that had businesses, successful businesses, and they were saying, hey, you can do this, just go for it, right? So it's so many words. And so once they were saying that, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And in fact, it's funny, today I went to a lunch with a guy that was asking me about this exact topic. And that's why he was, I would say it's my first fan lunch. He's been following me. He's been following me on Instagram. Yeah, and he was like, I've been watching your videos, and that's why I wanted to go to lunch with you, because I wanted to ask you some questions about the business, because he's, wants to grow his career. And so I was like, that was pretty cool.
Fans. Now, I remember you told me years ago, I remember a lot of things. Everything kind of always is, like I said, constantly hilarious to me. And I imagine this moment for you. You were talking about when you finally decided to quit your job and you mulled over it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I decided to quit the job, what was crazy is when we were working on this business, I got a job offer. So first I had a good paying job. I was probably making around $90K, and this is 12 years ago, so it's more than it is now. $90K is not as big of a deal as it was then. It was a lot bigger deal. So I was making good money, and I had all the benefits, vacation, everything, at a secure company. And then before I launched, I got an offer from another company offering me $130, which was like more than I had ever even dreamed of. And I turned that one down because the reason I turned it down, because I was making at that point when I turned it down, that solidified my decision that there's no turning back, that I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to start Fit. And because I was like, I can go to this business and I could probably get the customers that I had. There was a lot of customers that had worked with this company that had left, and my target was to go get them. And I was like, they'll probably follow me into one job, but they might not do it twice. If it's good, they're going to stay. Right. And if it's bad, they're not going to trust me again.
You got one shot.
So I got one shot. So I was like, if I'm going to use the one shot, I'm going to use it at Fit, not at this other company. Yeah.
Bet on yourself. But that's a nugget. Bet on yourself. Bet on yourself.
Bet on yourself, yeah.
Well, so you had all of that kind of like, I guess, hesitation and all that. But then you told me Joel just came to your house one day and said, hey, buddy, I quit my job.
Oh, yeah. So he saw me quit. Yeah. And then kind of the goal was like, all right, let's get some more revenue. Then he'll quit next when there's enough. And he, like, 2 months later, he's just like, hey, he was here. He's like, I quit my job. And I'm like, but we don't got the money yet. Like, he's like, well, I guess we got to make it work. I was like, okay, cool. I guess there's no turning back now.
That's funny.
So he just, he had less fear, that kind of thing, which was great.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, by the time I met you guys, I met you 2 years later, it seems like you guys were believers, because I remember meeting you actually in this exact room, right? And then we started working and we met. I don't know exactly where it was. It was like a shared office space. And you were describing to me the model of the service delivery, and you were drawing it on a whiteboard. And you said, what we do is we have pods and we have teams. And in my head, I'm like, dude, there's 4 people that work here. What teams are you talking about? Right? We have one team, and we're all here right now. But to see it now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to see you spoke it like it already had happened.
Yeah.
Now we have 9 teams, 9 or 10 teams. But at the time, I was just like, dude, this guy's kind of crazy because there's nobody else here.
Yeah, it's just us.
No, that's a good point, because that's something that I picked up on as well. Anytime I would talk to them, is that they would always talk about the company in terms of like what it would be if it was 10 or 20, 30 times bigger than what it was. Yeah. And actually that workspace at Comerge just down the street from here.
Comerge, that's right.
Ephraim and I were there one time, and I asked him, like, what's the goal? How big do you want this company to get? And we happened to be walking by like the biggest conference room that they had there, and he said, my goal or my dream is to fill up a room like this with engineers to train.
Yeah, wow.
And then looking at it now, the engineers that we have wouldn't even fit in that room.
Wouldn't even fit in that room, yeah.
And it was like, it was a pretty good sized room, right? And it's just crazy to think, like, if even at our previous office building, if all of the employees at Fit were to come into that office, the parking lot wouldn't be able to.
There's no way. Yeah, there's no way.
So I had worked, so part of that was, it's funny because I didn't really have a lot of mentoring at that time like I do now. I was like more figuring it out. But when I worked at this other MSP, they had gotten to 5 million. So they had like 20 something people. And so they were a little more established, had an accounting person or 2 people. Then they had like their account management, sales, engineering, help. They had like kind of the base pieces. So in my mind, like I was just on autopilot to build that. And then we got that, and then I was like, oh man, like now what? But then I was also in a position, I was like, okay, well, we got to go more, because if we stop now, then there's not a whole lot of opportunity for people
to keep going.
Yeah, right? So then it's like, okay, it's not just, I don't know, it's still tough. If you're 5 million, it's still tough in this industry.
In
this space, because it's not,
nobody's safe.
And so, and then it wasn't much growth opportunity for the 20 some people you have. Like, okay, we gotta go more.
Yeah, you can't promote up really that way.
No.
Now remind me though, David, because I felt when I met you guys, I could see, I was like, all right, listen, I was actually leaving the East Coast, right? So I was kind of starting my whole life over. I only had a few dollars in my pocket. And I said, okay, I'm going to take a chance on this team, which seems very small, and I had no idea how it was going to work. But I remember you telling me when you started, you didn't even want to cash your paycheck.
Yeah, tell that story. You don't have a paycheck? Do you have a paycheck you haven't cashed yet?
I do. I think I have a couple.
How many years old is that?
It's over 10 years old now.
You can still cash it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if we have that bank account anymore.
we might get in trouble with
somebody's going to get
employment labor laws here in this podcast.
Yeah, so I mean, I was still young, so I was still figuring out how the world works and taxes and IRS and everything. And so in my mind, I thought to myself, like, if I don't cash it, they, as in the government, they'll never know that I had this money, right? So that way I didn't have to pay taxes on it. And my belief in Fit was really so low that I thought, like, hey, if and when this goes south, I don't have to like report this money or whatever, right? Yeah. It's like, so I'll just like keep it on paper, right? So I was subcontracting with them or with us with Fit. And Joel would send the checks, and I would get them. It's like cool, like it was fun, but I'll just keep this here, right? But then they just kept coming.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, there's something to this.
Every
right?
2 weeks, I'm getting paid. What is this about? Like, what's going on here? No, that's funny, man. That's funny. I thought in the beginning, like very early on, once we started working, maybe 2 months in, my wife wasn't working, and I kind of went home one day. I was like, listen, I like these guys, but it's small, and I was like, it feels like a house of cards. At any given moment, I feel like this could all fall apart.
Yeah.
This is how I felt, right? I was like, so I need to save up just in case. So I remember at that time we started earnestly like, okay, we're going to hang in there, but let's try to save money just in case. But I would say within a year from that moment, things really started taking off.
Yeah. And
I was like, dude, I don't know what this guy's doing, but he's doing something. He's got something, you know what I mean? Like, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I was like, they're figuring it out. And that fear, that kind of like that thought process kind of just it left me. You know, I was like, all right, I'm a believer. Like this thing
Yeah.
is rolling. You know, and facility after facility, onboarding after onboarding, it just starts to pile up till you start to look back, and you know it's kind of like digging a hole. You look
Yeah.
back and you're like, dude, the mound of dirt
Yeah.
is enormous. You know,
Yeah.
Right? So that's how, like, that was my perspective on it those first couple of years.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you said, that mound of dirt, that work, it makes me think about, like, also around the time I started, I asked Ephraim, like, if there's ever days like, hey, you know, can I finish early today or whatever, and he told me you can always finish early if you've already done everything there is to do, like, for the day. And to this day, like, that's never happened. Like, and so it was like a challenge, right? And even when we were that small, there was still like so much to do, so
Yeah.
much to build.
Probably even more. Back
Maybe
then.
even
I felt
more,
like,
yeah.
Back then I felt like there was I agree.
So how far ahead would you look at things from in terms of like what you would try to build out, or like, what was your focus always?
I
on
didn't
here
really have
now?
a timeline like we do now, like where we're doing budgeting and
Yeah.
all these kind of things. I didn't know how to do that, so we didn't have like end of quarter goals or even annual budgets. We just knew we had to grow. That was basically it, and all I knew was we needed revenue. That was the blood, the lifeline. So it was always just trying to get more, take care of the customers, not lose any customers, you know, deliver on service, have that quality, you know, always come through for them, because then they do more, they refer us and all that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that was the big one. Now we have, I think, way more clear vision. I think even at that time, even though I knew we were going to grow and we were going to do some big things, like if you had said, hey, you're going to be 20 million in 10 years, on the 11th year you're going to be pushing 30, I wouldn't, like, my brain,
Yeah.
I don't know if I could have comprehended it.
Yeah.
Like 10 million was like such a big number in my mind at that time.
Yeah, it was
Like
a big deal
almost
when we-
it was
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
unattainable. And then when we did it, still didn't feel like, it's like, I don't know. I'm the type of guy, like, I have to stop to celebrate, because sometimes we'll hit a number like that, and then I'm just like, oh,
Same, yeah.
okay, like, let's I'm just already I'm already moving,
Yeah.
and I'm not like, you know,
Same.
popping champagne and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I was
need
already
to-
thinking about the next deal, or something that's on the rocks, like anything like that.
Definitely got to stop and celebrate those wins. I remember thinking early on, well, not even early on, but before I had signed any clients, you know, signed any deals myself, I kind of made it a goal. I was like, Damien, you should at least bring something to the table, sign a contract. You know, there was a loose commission structure at the time, but especially once we had the commission structure, I was like, okay, like, I'm going to make a commission, right? I'm going to get a deal in. Everyone's going to pay me for doing it. And I remember when the first couple started happening, I don't think I ever really, like, you know, took it in and celebrated.
Yeah.
And now when I look back at the client base, I'm like, man, I've gotten commission on almost every customer you
Yeah.
know here. And I'm like, okay, well, we're doing it. But you kind of, it's just like reaching that mark to 10 million. You're working so hard that when you finally get there, you're not as blown away. But you got to take time to look back at what you've done and just appreciate it, right? I mean, it didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, I thought when we would get 10 million, that we pretty much had everything figured out by that point. And then you just realize
Just rinse and repeat.
Far from it, yeah.
far from it,
More
right?
money, more problems.
There's more that you don't know about.
Yeah, same at 20, same at 30. I think even at 100, you're probably like, dang, like, we got so much stuff to do, so much things to improve. So I think it's just a living beast that you can't stop, and it's either it's growing or it's shrinking.
That's the thing. If it's not growing, if it's not getting bigger, it is getting smaller.
Yeah, that's
a scary thought.
That's a super
That's a
scary
scary
thought,
thought,
especially because we're dealing with customers that are laying off employees.
COVID happened. Finance, all these industries changed in many, many ways. So,
so we're going through the cycles. We've fortunately been able to keep pushing, find more clients. Sounds like we got a deal today. Congratulations.
Yeah, we did get a deal. Yeah, that was
So
good.
that's great, and you know, now my mind's like, okay, we got to service them, take care of them, grow it, you know, keep it going.
That's where I'm at.
That brings up a good point, though, because it kind of highlights the importance of having those goals. And I think it was in a Grant Cardone video where it's like, you know, have goals so big that the problems that you have today seem like almost irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of been something that's been consistent throughout the just kind of the fit history, right, is it's hard to stop. It's been hard for us to stop and celebrate those things just because we're already thinking about how to resolve problem A to get to problem B, to get all the way to problem Z.
Yeah, create new problems. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and that's all it's been. It's just creating new problems,
Yeah.
new opportunities as it is, and the opportunities that we have now, approaching 30. It's when we look back at 60, it's gonna be like, yeah, those were super.
Yeah, exactly.
And like in those days, like that you're talking about, there were problems where we'd probably lose sleep over them that night, and you look back at them now, and it's just like,
That's a good question.
Yeah, we solve that problem every day now.
What was like the biggest problem when you started in the first year? If you had to think back, like a big problem, that was a big problem.
But that kind of highlights my point. It's so hard to even
remember.
You don't even remember it.
Yeah.
So tell me about a sleepless night, a fit sleepless night. Somebody, either one of you.
Mine, I mean, I hope you're okay with me sharing the story, but I've mentioned it before. Like, for me, it was actually I am thinking of a definitive thing now. Like for me in my role, it was always making sure that there was enough money in the bank for the payroll.
Oh yeah.
Right, and so that was kind of my headache. That's what kept me up at night.
Yeah.
Is you said, hey David, just you got to do what you got to do to make those collections, right? Tell them you'll drive up to their office. And I did. I have to sometimes I'd have to drive up because I look at the bank account. We have X amount of money. It's like when that payroll hits on Friday, where it's going to overdraft, right? And so that was my big headache: is how do I get these numbers to go up to match the numbers that are going to come out, right? And so there was a time when it wasn't going to happen, and I had to kind of make that decision, take on that ownership mentality, and I checked off everybody's name on the payroll except mine because that way it wouldn't overdraft the account. And then I told you about that a couple days later, and you felt so bad, and you're like, oh, buddy, just come over here. And then you told me to come over to your house, you wrote me a personal check for an account, but that experience taught me so many things about just having that ownership mentality, just owning what you do, making sure that you understand how your activities contribute to the larger
overall,
goals,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you made your problems as an owner everyone's problems, and that's kind of how I try to reinforce my team as well. It's like, hey guys, I want you to think about things how I view them.
Yeah.
Because these are how Ephraim views them, and that's how we should all view them.
Yeah.
That's heavy. That's heavy. Come
I
on,
like it.
Fit sleepless night.
Man, I think if I knew we were going to lose a client or a big one that was on the rocks, that was pretty stressful for me because then you have the whole staff equation, all of that. So there's been a few of those. 2017, I think, was a pivotal one because what I used to do is I would put a lot of effort into selling. It took usually 3 to 4 months, but then all these deals would kind of start rolling because I was hustling, start to close deals at the 3, 4 month, 5 month mark. Once the deals came in, then I kind of stopped selling, not because I wanted to, but because it was delivery mode, right? And we had to make sure the contracts went well. So anyway, you'd have this revenue up and down thing like that. And I wasn't really financially literate, and I didn't know how to properly sell. So we got in financially payroll stuff where, there was barely any money in the bank after payroll, and I was like, man, we are 2017. I think we are ready.
You were way into it, man.
We were way
we
into it.
had the office already.
We had an office.
Yeah.
I think we're 6-7 million. I'm like, we are way too big to be playing these games anymore, right? This is the stakes are too high. What am I doing? So then had some stress on that, and then that's when I started doing. I started getting coaching, financial coaching, by a guy named Wes, and then some other guys, and then I started doing Grant Cardone videos to learn how to do sales better. So that's when I started that stuff.
Yeah. Putting a sales process together was huge. I don't want to get there yet.
Yeah.
I feel like we haven't gotten there yet, but that to me was huge. Yeah. My fit sleepless night pales in comparison.
Oh, I want to hear it.
I accidentally insulted a customer, right? You probably remember this. I still don't know that what I said was that upsetting, but it it made these people upset.
Yeah,
right?
I think I remember that.
And
Yeah.
so I remember this the customer,
Was it IFG?
IFG, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the guy kind of, he was very upset. He's just like pointing. I remember he had like a $20,000 watch on, right? Like this Submariner Rolex. And I remember thinking, man, I can't wait till I can just yell at somebody with a 20 grand watch. Right? And then he was like, "Don't come back in the building." And I was like, "Wait, what?"
I remember
like,
this,
it
yeah.
just it went so far so quickly. And then you told me later, maybe he said that to you, and then later I kind of heard the same thing. And I felt like, okay, Fit has got to let me go because this is a big part of our business. And had you have let me go, even though I didn't feel like that situation was my fault, I would have totally understood. I'd have been like,
Yeah.
yeah, this doesn't work anymore. But we ended up bringing in like somebody, and I ended up not going there. But I would still help them over the phone, and they had no idea it was me. And they loved me, like unilaterally across the board, they would love me. And one day, one of the people who said that they didn't want me to come back in said, "I can't wait to meet you in person." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "You don't know who I am?" But so we ended up kind of like just like touching base, and I was like, "Hey, listen, is everything okay? I want to come back." And she was like, "Oh, that's you?" She was like, "Oh yeah, come back." So we ended up, like, I was just like, "Okay." So like I went back in, and from that moment on, it was all good. The owner of the company asked me questions, wants to see pictures of my children and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I remember in the beginning feeling like a real idiot. Because I will say, I make a lot of jokes, right? Sometimes people laugh, sometimes they don't. Right? So
Can't win them all.
So you can't, yeah. So that
Yeah.
that was a bad moment because I felt like I had let it was a team effort. The way we were kind of attacking the client, I felt like I let the team down, and that's never.
I had a
similar.
I had a similar thing. I remember, it wasn't exactly like that, but I had a customer, and I remember exactly what my boss said because it wasn't anything super offensive, but it got super weird. Then they started acting unprofessionally, and it was just a bad situation, similar. And I remember what my boss told me. He's like, "Whenever in doubt, err on the side of professionalism." And so he was basically saying, don't, like when you're servicing a customer, you can be super friendly and nice, but to a certain degree, you just keep it kind of vanilla, and you don't get too personal. You just err on the side of professionalism so that you kind of just keep it about business. And I think for us, because we care about our customers, sometimes you do build closer personal relationships. But that was a lesson, and then like from that point, I was like, dude, he's so right. And I remember going back, kind of like you went back. Like I went back to that customer, and I ended up having a great relationship with them after that. But I remember like in my mind, I was like, I ain't talking about the ball game. I'm not talking about nothing. Just like, how was your day? I would be nice. Hey, how was your day? Fantastic. Hey, let me talk about this and that. Like whatever they needed. Is there anything you need, Mr. Customer? Let me get that for you right away. Here's the update on this. I just kept it about professionalism only.
Yeah, never again. You gotta keep. It can't be about you, right? Sometimes you put the spotlight on yourself for whatever reason, but it can't be about you.
Yeah. Now, that brings up a good point, or a question that I had is like when, or what do you guys remember about early training at Fit? Because like that's a good nugget that you have there of like, hey, always err on the side of professionalism. But there was a certain point, even before we started like investing heavily in Cardone training, but there was a certain point where we realized we're bringing in quality people, but they're not all trained right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So, my old boss, mentor Doug Ford, was a Microsoft trainer. And what he used to do, and obviously it was a smaller company like we used to be, every Friday afternoon, he'd bring the whole team in, and he was like this amazing whiteboard guy. Like he could whiteboard just beautiful pictures that you could easily understand.
Sounds like your mentor.
He was my mentor. I love whiteboarding. I learned from him. I can't whiteboard as good as he did because his looked picture perfect. Yeah. But he was a Microsoft trainer, so he broke things down really technical things, really easy to understand. And it's funny, I keep in contact because all that group that I trained with, a lot of those people I still have contact with, and some are customers, and other people we just, we network, and all of them kind of talk about that time. So I naturally started doing that same thing at Fit. But as you get bigger, there's so many topics, and in my mind, I had already taught a certain topic, but 6 months later, there's new people. they never learned that topic. So I was constantly running into the thing like, man, I thought we talked about this. I'm like,
I
oh,
told
he wasn't,
you about
he wasn't here. Oh, shoot, you know.
All right, come in, we'll whiteboard again, right?
Yeah, and you can't like, it's not scalable to that. So yeah, so we've been doing this role play all week with disaster recovery.
Yeah.
Or now it's going on the second week, and man, like today I did Zach. Yesterday was Rob. Like some of these guys just like blew me away because you could progressively see how good they were, and I'm like, I could set them in front of any customer. And Rob even said, he's like, I actually used this role play yesterday, and it went really well, and it was for a customer. And I was like, so he was just, set up for success, and
the
it
role
went
play
good.
works. Role play works. I use role play with my children now. So now
Well-
I'm like, listen, I'm like, hey, what are you going to do if somebody comes up to you and says, well, I have my daughter say something two or three times, right? It could be something as simple as reciting her address. Let's say you're lost in the zoo. This is something I never would have thought of before you started us doing role play during COVID, right? But now I use role play with the kids
All
so
the
they
time.
can practice, and it works.
It's good. Well, I mean, you're both sports guys, right? You're a soccer guy. You're a football guy.
Football, yeah.
You cannot find one professional sport where they're not running practices and plays as a team, as a unit, before they go into any game.
Exactly.
Like they wouldn't even cut it.
Even right before the game, right? Like the pregame.
Oh, dude, and they're running the plays,
Yeah.
and then it's like football. The quarterbacks say what play. Pretty much all of them do that. But they're running the plays. They get to know the teammates. They get to to know their offense, their defense.
Yeah. No.
Everything. Military does it. It's crazy to me that business is the only place where people send their people in with no practice.
Yeah, not prepared. Yeah,
Not prepared. Not prepared. And maybe some training, but no real no real practice. And they have to figure it out. It's on-the-job training. Learn from experience.
Yeah.
And they got millions of dollars on the line. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and a lot of times in those earlier days, I think that's how we would train. It was just a direct result of, oh, this happened, so I guess we got to train on that now.
Yeah.
Like someone would do something or say something on the phone, and it became
A training.
a customer issue, and then next thing you know, it's like on a slideshow for the new
Yeah.
employees that are coming in. Right?
That's what it is.
I say that because something that I did ended up on one of his slideshows.
Oh, really?
Well, we still do that. I mean, like this disaster recovery role play training. I sat in a technology business plan, and we didn't do horrible.
Yeah.
It wasn't a horrible delivery. I would say, from my standard, it was maybe like a 6 out of 10. I'm like, there's no reason it couldn't have been a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why? So then we were like, hey, let's just make it better. And that's what we did.
It's definitely more proactive now. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's
Way
not an
more,
issue, it's like,
yeah.
well, just do it anyways.
And then we
Yeah.
recycle the topics,
Yeah.
because in 6 months you're going to already have so many new people. Plus, you just get rusty.
Yeah, no, the role play, I love it. I think preparing people to do their job well is key. I don't see any way around it now. Well, I want to go back to one thing, and maybe it's too early to talk about this.
Talk about it.
FSA.
Oh yeah, we did
I remember
branding.
when you introduced this, I was just like, dude, this is just another thing I'm going to have to do. This is going to be some work. And
So for everyone listening, FSA, Freedom Security Alliance, was the original name of Fit Cybersecurity. So now it still exists, Fit Cybersecurity. It's our, well, you do a lot in it. So you're still doing stuff in it.
Yes, yeah.
A lot of customer service, cross-selling, consulting, VCSO work, the compliance side, dealing with escalations, issues.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and also like before, like we get into like the things that it does and how it is now, like what always impresses me looking back at it is how early at Fit it was really an idea.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was like in 2015.
Yeah,
It kind of
2015.
became official, right?
That's when we did it.
And when you think about it, like nowadays in 2023, like everybody who's anybody's talking about, oh yeah, we have cybersecurity. Oh yeah, we have cybersecurity.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
even distributors now that we work with on the procurement side come out and say, hey, we also offer cybersecurity, and it's like
We've been doing
this
Doing
for
it,
like
yeah.
years
Yeah.
now, right? And,
Yeah.
And some of those earlier days, like at FSA, I still remember, like I thought it was a strange request. You told me, hey, order It was like 8 desktops or something like that.
Yeah.
And sent them to the office. Okay, that's weird, right? And then like the one FSA employee that we had at the time, like, you know, he was there and he set them all up. And going back to my previous point, is like you're always looking forward. How is it going to be when it grows bigger? We didn't even have 8 employees at the company, right?
Yeah.
But yet you wanted the tables pushed together, right? And just like a square, and like, you know, each of them is going to have a monitor. No one's going to sit at them.
Dude,
Yeah.
So you had the spots for those people
Yeah.
when they were there.
We
Right?
sat in an empty security operations center for like a year.
Yeah.
like we had a SOC and
Yeah.
nobody worked there. It was just
Yeah.
us, and like we're just in there doing.
I think I did learn a little bit of a lesson from that. Is like get the revenue first, then build it.
Yeah.
But we did it on reverse on that one. We built it, they got the revenue, but
funny-
it's good.
And our accountants let us know about it.
Yeah, they were like, "What are you guys wasting money
I
on?"
still remember the first SOC box. Well, I think it was the first. I'm pretty
So
sure.
that FSA, yeah, we
Yeah.
rebranded it as a sock box.
Yeah. Yeah, so the first, so right, security operations center, right? So we would take a server, put it in your environment, and then we'd monitor your environment from there. So I remember a customer signed an IT deal, and you pushed them to also sign a cyber deal, and they were very agreeable, but they were in Idaho. And so we were sending out a former employee, this is like a Monday or something like that, we were sending out a former employee on like a Wednesday to go onboard them for IT. And then you messaged me and you were like, okay, so we got a cyber deal, right? And we got to get a server out there. And I'm like, okay, cool, right? Like, you know, nobody knew what was going on. So, all right, what are we going to do? And he was like, well, we got to get a server. I'm like, all right, let's, you know, we're going to order one. David can order.
Yeah.
He was like, no, we need it by Wednesday. I was like, what? So I drove to Fry's and I paid for everything in cash. I got like the chassis, the hard drive, RAM, all this stuff. Brought it back to the office. And then like set it all up. You told me to install VMware on it. You had all these instructions. I had no idea where they were coming from. I was like, okay, so I installed VMware on it, installed some other thing, and then the NIC didn't work because the like you have to have like a professional
Right.
like server level NIC to go with VMware. So I ended up ordering it off of eBay. And the guy who was going to install it all was like brand new. And I was like, listen, man, do we have like a one-shot chance of this even working? I'm going to order this thing off of eBay and send it to your hotel or the office or whatever it was where you were going. And I'm going to ship the computer. I gave you the computer. You shipped it like overnight. And he met all of the equipment there, set it all up, and boom, we had like our first like FSA customer online, like monitoring their environment. And I was honestly shocked that it worked. I was like, bro, like we can do that again. Like, if we have a couple of weeks, we can do it like order stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and they are still a customer to
They're
this
still a
day.
customer.
Yeah, and they have a new server.
Yeah,
thank
thankfully,
God. but yeah, I thought I was honestly, as we were doing that, I was like, there's no way this is going to work. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was such a last ditch effort, like trying to get it all together. But I mean, sometimes, you know, I felt like that was the mantra back then, like whatever it takes.
Yeah,
to get it
that's
done.
true.
It's like
So,
an Avengers movie right there.
yeah,
Whatever it takes, right?
it was fun.
No,
Yeah,
that's
and I think
good.
that was like the sentiment, if like sticking with the cyber topic a little bit, right? I think that was the common sentiment across the board. It's like what are we doing? Like, is this going to work? Like, why am I doing work for Fit and then I'm also having to do work over here? Like on my side, like I had to do payroll for both.
Yeah, exactly. We had like
Yeah.
everybody had their 2 email addresses. Even my wife was like, "So you have 2 jobs now?"
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
like-
That crossed my
I
mind.
was
as
like,
well.
yeah, I guess. I was like, you know, we're just, you know, I'm
I-
there. You know,
Yeah, I think the big mistake we made that was a learning opportunity was we tried to do a separate branding. So we had first FSA and then Fit, and then it was Fit and Sockbox, and then we changed. Then finally we're like, because what it was doing in people's minds is making it too separate. And even though it was a separate offering, no one was saying, oh, why are you doing procurement and IT services? Even though that's probably more different than IT
Yeah.
and cyber,
It is, yeah.
right?
Big
So because of the branding. So when we changed it to Fit Cybersecurity and then Fit IT Solutions, then it was like, oh, okay, this is the IT part, this is the cyber part, one organization. Started getting more cohesive.
Yeah. When you mentioned the separate branding, I don't know why, but what came to my mind was the FSA commercial that you tried to
The
make.
video.
Yeah,
Yes,
I don't know, maybe we can
the
add that
video.
in
We
post
played
or
the
something.
video.
Yeah.
We played the
When the eagle comes in and
remember-
takes the bad guy
Dude,
away.
Yeah, I wonder if it's still on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
don't
anyone
know.
would have taken it down.
Dude, we
look it
paid
up.
$9,000 for that video.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
crazy.
It was a lot of money.
But
I
looking
could-
back,
video.
it's pretty cringe though. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but explain to me though, because like this is.
I thought it was
obviously-
going to work and get customers. It didn't do nothing.
Nothing, yeah. Well, you always had the tours. Remember, we finally got the office and we had the
Yeah.
SOC.
Yeah.
The SOC, and then like Ephraim was like, everybody in the office for a tour, and like we would just sit in there, you know what I mean, like working on
working,
something
yeah.
completely different. But what like, what made you feel like it was important at the time? That's kind of what because I didn't
that's a good
see it,
question.
yeah.
I knew cybersecurity was going to be bigger and bigger with time. I think we were early because people still weren't spending as much money on it as I thought they would. And then the other thing is, I remember when I was in the ISP, there was always a spear point that got us business. So the tip of the spear when I first started was like, man, what was it? Well, I think managed IT services, moving from a break fix model to like a recurring, like steady model. That was kind of the spear point. Then later it became virtualization. So like, hey, we can consolidate all your servers. You got 50 servers. Guess what? You can have it on 2-3 boxes now, and we can do this VMware thing. So we were early at VMware. That was the spear point. And then later on, DR and disaster recovery was the spear point. Hey, what if your stuff goes down, building burns up? We can do it. So there was always something that was, people didn't really want to just talk about IT services. Mm-hmm. There was some other topic on their mind, and then it turned into that conversation. So, disaster recovery or virtualization. Now virtualization is not a spear point anymore. That's a given. Nobody has non-virtualized servers.
Yeah.
It just doesn't even exist, right? Oh, cloud was another one.
Yeah.
So virtualization, then we had DR, disaster recovery, and then later cloud. Those were like kind of the 3 spear points I remember. I was like, well, what's the new spear point? And it was cybersecurity. So, and I would say it worked in that sense because a lot of times we still do, we still get cybersecurity leads, and then they don't even buy cybersecurity. They end up buying IT services. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And you see, I mean, when you're in the industry, it makes perfect sense, right? When you're doing it, you're like, okay, I can see where this is heading. But I still think people struggle to identify what's going to be the next big offering, what's going to be the next big thing that you can do. And I felt like you hit that cyber, like right on. It was a little early, but being early in that situation was perfect because by the time it really became a thing, we were so mature that even now, even the deal we just got, right, they're comparing us to another company that offers, I think, in their mind, the same thing, but we're so much more mature, right? We have so much more.
Yeah,
so
weren't those guys
behind us.
like outsourcing, not even doing a lot of their monitoring?
Exactly.
Yeah, just put a tool on there.
Right,
Yeah.
put a tool, exactly, yeah. And that's the thing, is that we have so much more power behind us, you know what I mean? And that, to me, that's because we've been in it for so long. I did not sign up, I did not come out of high school thinking I was going to be in cybersecurity at all. Wasn't on my mind.
Yeah.
Right? I just, something, one day you walked into a conference room and bang, I was all about it, you know what I mean? I was an IT person, right? You know what I mean? I've had conversations with hackers. I've seen people lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. None of this was a part of my vision, it was just kind of, but it is, it's life now, so, yeah.
And the cyber topic, if you guys want to switch gears a little bit, but it also brings to my mind going from taking the conversation from the customer side of things to the internal side of things and the effects that it had on the culture at Fit, right? Because for the longest time, I think that was a growing pain that we had early on, is just kind of having that wall between.
Yeah, cyber and IT were kind of so segregated that they didn't really operate together too well.
Yeah, and kind of being at the office, which, being at the office, for those of us that did come into the office, it helped a bit, right? But it wasn't until, I think around the time the pandemic hit, that we realized it has to kind of be just one.
It was the logo change that changed it.
Yeah, it has to be one big team.
Yeah. Yeah, the logo changed it. I think we also had another thing, and it's weird because I'm still conflicted about even talking about this. I'm a big proponent of the in-office culture because there's so much benefit to it. But for our particular business and the way we operate, it almost was better when we all went remote. There's still some things lost, and we try to make it up in different ways. It's not exactly the same, but you can't have field we had 2 different cultures before the pandemic. So we had the office culture, which was really strong, tight and pretty strong, and then we had the field culture. So everyone that was in the field or not in the, even if they were in San Diego, but they were spending their time on site, they didn't really feel connected to the culture.
Yeah.
When we all leveled the playing field and we all went remote, we were forced to do metrics and accountability for each role in each department. And we also started doing like things like all hands, role play, training together, all these different things. It completely leveled the playing field. So I don't feel, or the feedback I get from the employees, you know, someone in San Diego doesn't feel any different than the person in South Carolina or the guy in Florida or Utah or Texas. You know, it's just like
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think that's true. I remember the office. Well, there was no office for a while, right? I mean, you went to the office, and then I came in if I wasn't on site or if I wasn't, just doing tickets.
And we kept trying to squeeze that what square peg in a round hole, forcing the engineers in, but then. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think that, and then what we had a couple of engineers in Kentucky at the time, and I remember those guys kind of like, oh, I wish I got to know you guys a little bit better. It definitely was a very, very different experience for them working at Fit than it was for myself. Yeah. And always being on site, I actually enjoyed it because I like meeting new people. But coming back to the office was huge. But I will say, like something like Zoom, we used it. But it did change the game, right? Because once we were all sitting there looking at each other's faces on the squares, I don't know if you remember, all hands started. We had no structure.
Yeah. No structure. We'd have all hands in the last 40 minutes.
Yeah,
sometimes
exactly,
just start talking for a long time.
Like the State of the Union, like every day, you know what I mean? And then you guys put together a structure, and I was like, dude, everybody knows what to expect. Everyone feels connected now. You're breaking out rooms with I've met every single person. We've talked at least a little bit. And it's created a completely different dynamic. I don't know if other companies are doing that.
They should be.
But if they're not, they should be.
Well, I think a lot of I think that is the problem that a lot of remote companies are doing. They're trying to do the hybrid, they're trying to do the remote, but then they don't have, I think the only way for it to work is that you have to have that connection point, because that's the one piece that connects the culture. That daily all-hands meeting, you're like, well, I could be servicing customers. It's kind of a waste. We're talking about, department wins. I'm not even in that department. Like, talking about mission and vision every day, blah, blah, blah. I already know it. It doesn't matter. That's the connection point, because that's as close as you're ever going to get to being in an office with other people. Yeah. That's it, right? So, and then the format of that is super important as well, not just that it's willy-nilly. So we kind of copied that format from Cardinal Ventures, seeing how they ran it. And we then just basically copied it, and it worked. It worked great. And then the other thing is the metrics, right? So I'm sure there's some people, that come in the organization that sometimes are gaming the system on productivity, but it reveals itself in the numbers, and then it just doesn't last too long. I mean, the team. I don't even have to go and say, "Oh, someone sucks, get fired." Other teammates fire them.
Yeah, right away.
Right away, they're like, "Dude, I'm working too hard." Yeah,
you know who's who. When you're an IT engineering team and there's only a few of you, you know who's doing what, and it will pop out in the metrics for sure. The what is it? Is it productivity?
Yeah, you got billable utilization.
Utilization is the word.
And then you have client satisfaction. You can see, and then a less important metric, but it's a contextual metric, is how many tickets. Now, some guys are ticket crushers, and then other people, they're working bigger problems, they're going to have less tickets, so the ticket's not as important. But contextually, if you know that this guy is supposed to be crushing tickets, and his billable utilization is looks high, but then he's like, well, why is he only doing this versus this guy doing this? Like, I could look at a guy like Nicholas. I know he's going to have very little tickets. Because he's only working these giant projects. I only need to look. He might have 2 tickets all week. Yeah. But then you have, 2 new guys, and you can see right away what's going. It's a contextual thing, and it tells a story.
Yeah. Right. He came on a little after you started.
A little after. Listen, if there's anybody to talk about in a forum like this who goes under the radar, never says anything.
The ninja.
The ninja.
Yeah.
The IT ninja, dude. I've never seen somebody work so hard and so meticulously. He's like a knife through butter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With everything. I remember we've only done one onboarding long time ago in San Diego, Lantern Crest, and he had to spend the night there, right? Because it's like a hostile takeover, right? We had a rough go, basically hacking into all of their systems because that's what they wanted us to do. and he locked his laptop in in one of the rooms. And so he's just like, dude, I'm just going to stay here tonight. He lived in L.A., right? He lived 2 hours from home. He's like, somebody's got to take my daughter to pick my daughter up. But other than that, I'm good. But, dude, he's just one of those committed people.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
I barely know him. I've known him for almost 10 years, and I barely know him, but I know how hard he works. I really respect him, man.
Everybody does, no one's can ever say they've had like a bad experience with Nicholas. I remember when he first started, I think it was myself and Emilio had started around that time as well, and something noteworthy that we found about him is he asked us so many questions about
he did ask a lot of questions in the beginning.
And each of us were kind of assigned, Emilio and I, we were assigned to different employees to train. I think Emilio was assigned to Nicholas, and he was telling me, I don't know about this Nicholas guy. He just asked too many questions.
In the beginning, he had a lot of questions, but I started.
But there was a reason why. It's because he wasn't going to ask you again after you answered it, right?
Yeah.
What happened is that he turned, though, right? So he did ask a lot of questions in the beginning, and I could help him. But then, as he got deeper into it, he started asking me questions that I couldn't answer. Then before I know it, I'm asking him questions. So it was it happened quickly with him.
Yeah, it's all part of his master plan.
He's got it, man. He's definitely got the juice.
And also to go back briefly to the pre all hands culture that we had, because there's a before and after all hands.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about what really did connect us then before having all hands.
The only thing would be being in the office, and then once a quarter we did a State of the Union type thing.
And
it's a 2-hour meeting.
And there were times when you would sporadically, what seemed like random, it's all right, we're gonna have all hands, and everyone in the office would kind of go into the conference room.
Yeah.
A couple of people would show up on the cameras on Zoom, but it was just all right, well, here we go. There's an all hands happening, right?
But even then it was maybe we had some message we wanted to relay.
Right, and it was we were all there for one specific reason.
Yeah, maybe one or two things.
When we were smaller, it was interesting because there was a few people who worked completely remote, and I never got to know those guys. But you obviously, I saw you guys all the time. We were on HipChat at the time. HipChat, right? We had Slack. We had all those forms, and that always kind of, I felt, made you feel like you were connected. But as we grew, it became impossible to stay.
And figuring that out, I think we've largely figured it out with all the regular meetings that we have within each department, each team. But if you remember that these are my least favorite times of early fit is when we would have I guess you could say it was an all company meeting, even though it was just 6 or 7 of us, right? Yeah. But it was once a week we would all meet at CoMerge or whatever, and it was the account management meeting. It was the procurement meeting. It was it was the everything meeting, right? And it would just go on forever, right? And then remember how every meeting.
I remember we would whiteboard every customer's name on the whiteboard, and then we would systematically go through every customer's status.
I felt like we got that from Mad Men. Does anybody else feel did anybody watch? Did you watch Mad Men?
No, I only seen a couple episodes.
Yeah, that was kind of how they did it. I felt like I was on Mad Men. Every time we put all those names up, and it'd be what do you know about whatever customer it is,
right? And we were just who knows? Oh, Mike knows. All right, we'll call Mike. He's not here. And then we'd have to bring him in on the phone, and he'd have to explain the issue that was happening, right?
No, and some people, you had him, right? It was all right, this is Ephraim's person, Scott, for instance. We wouldn't dare ever approach that man. Let's let Ephraim deal with it. But yeah, it always felt it was, I'm not going to lie, I didn't like those meetings.
No, right, and because from my perspective, I was the host of the meeting, I guess, so I had to keep it ticking on to the next topic. And the reason I didn't like it is because the rabbit holes that we would go down. We would get to a point, I'm all right, guys, so I have this ticket. Does this customer need a server or not?
Yeah, no problem.
And then an hour later, it's a completely diffherent topip, but it somehow spiraled into that topic. Right?
We had some pretty insanely sharp guys on the team at the time, and I think a couple of them were butt heads. A little bit on some of the technical points.
Yeah, I think they wanted to always get into the technical topics for each customer.
Yeah.
And the problem was we were trying to do account management in the same meeting that we were doing engineering solutions, as well as ticket statuses, as well as accounting.
Yeah.
You couldn't.
Account status. Did they pay their bill? All right.
Yeah, it just didn't. It just wasn't.
There was the whole thing. Yeah. There was so much. Now that you bring it up, dude, there was so much.
It was so inefficient. So then we started saying, okay, well. And then we were doing technical training probably in that same meeting.
Exactly.
It just
it was
never,
a 4-hour meeting, and we got to the point where it's eventually had so many customers that it's like we can't just keep running them all aboard.
No,
There's got to be a better way.
So then we started breaking out. Okay, let's have like technical solutions discussions. Let's have ticket status discussions. Let's have account management discussions. Let's have accounting discussions. So it started like it was the everything we needed. It just wasn't
more
efficient.
Money, more problems.
Yeah,
right?
it must have been like whiteboarding heaven for you though,
That's
because
what
like
it is.
But sometimes it was, it just felt like you said that you did a lot of talking without a lot of results for the amount of talking that you were doing.
Right.
If you were talking for 4 hours, you thought you would get a lot done.
Getting a lot done, but I don't know that we were. Yeah,
we weren't getting that much
We
done.
weren't getting
We
that much
probably
done,
could have efficiently got that done in.
right.
I mean, now we're doing, like, just for example, the morning. Every team has a scrum.
Mm-hmm.
They do it in 15
It's
minutes.
so easy now.
And I watch them. I watch some of those scrums. Super efficient.
Yeah.
Hey, here's everybody's calendars. Here's the open ticket counts. This is our CSAT. Hey, I need to make sure someone can get here. Oh yeah, Brandon, you got that. Okay, perfect. Hey James, I'm gonna assign you this. Like,
Yeah.
And
It's so efficient now.
Yeah.
So easy to get done.
And then the other thing, I've kind of been out of the service delivery loop for a while, and I imagine it's changed. But at the time, the engineers were like completely autonomous in terms of like how they would schedule their days.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember those days. Yeah.
It's like, what are you going to do today? Well, every engineer had a different answer.
Everybody had to.
Yeah.
Well, you had a great idea. You gave us some structure when you introduced DE,
The
right?
desk engineer, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when we were all on a team, one person would stay put and work the tickets, and then the other guys would be scheduling themselves on site or whatever it is.
That's still used.
Yeah, I think it's still used to a degree. The service coordinator is doing the most of the
Okay.
scheduling now, so somebody is kind of hanging tight and doing the tickets, but
Yeah.
it's a little bit different now. But so when we had that system, I liked that because I knew what to expect. So when I was due desk engineer, even if it took me till late at night, I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to finish everything today.
Right.
That way nobody has to wake up and see anything new tomorrow. And that was like the standard. And even when it was just like me, Shane, and Devin, like there was 3 of us on this huge team, all these customers, we would always just end up working late,
Right.
crush every single ticket, and then the next day, whoever picked up, they could just pick up with new tickets that day. That worked, but then the rest of the week was completely autonomous. You just go and just,
Yeah.
do a holistic, go do lunch, or Ephraim
Yeah.
would just call you and just say, hey, we're going here. And I'd be like, yeah, I got it.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that autonomous anymore. Well, I mean, the engineers still have tons of authority
Yeah,
on
it's
what they
still-
do,
yeah, it's
right?
still-
But
it's bad, yeah.
they don't manage their calendars anymore.
Oh,
So
yeah.
now a triage dispatch person plays Tetris on all the calendars and puts the tickets based on SLA and priorities on their calendars.
That's nice.
And the nice thing is when you're an engineer, at first they resist it because they're thinking, I'm a professional, I know how to manage this kind of stuff.
Be control
But they don't
freaks.
have broad oversight, and then once they accept it, they're like, oh shoot, I can drown out all the other noise. All I gotta do is work on this task.
Yeah.
And then if they pull me off it to do a different one, then I can do that. Otherwise, I'm gonna knock this task out, and then I'm moving on to the next.
Yeah.
And so they, a lot of them start to get kind of, I don't know, it's like having a secretary, right?
Yeah.
Like you see people are we got a good secretary, you trust it. It's a nice thing because you can kind of be lazy. You can be in the sense of you don't have to juggle all the balls. You only have to focus on one thing at a time.
So much less pressure.
Yeah, and it's brought our average ticket counts went from 300 to like 100 per board.
Yeah, so everybody's sub 100.
Yeah, sub 100s now.
Yeah.
So it did have a big impact. The system actually works. So.
Yeah. And it was kind of the Wild West, not just in terms of that sense, in terms of like how the engineers structured their day, but going back to the topic of how everyone felt connected or lack thereof. Like
Yeah.
I remember there were times in my role early on where I wouldn't like see, because we didn't have an office clearly, like I wouldn't see or talk to anybody at Fit, the company that I work at, like for maybe days at a time. Like maybe I'll go to Ephraim's house like to work a day, or Joel's or something, but early on, like everyone just kind of had their own stuff to do.
Going, yeah.
And there wasn't like anywhere near the connected nature that we have now,
Yeah.
where you're not constantly, but you're frequently in meetings, seeing people, talking to people, collaborating. But back then it was just like, all right, this is what I have to do, this is what you have to do, and then everyone just kind of.
I think there was a big cultural shift also in that time when I look back. We had the approach of like everybody, like everybody throws ideas on the table, and everybody wanted to change processes and do different things at the same time.
Yeah.
And we've always, as a culture, been open to new ideas. But you get a new guy, and he's already got all these ideas on how to change the business, and this guy thinks, no, that's a dumb idea. I've been doing this, and we should do it this way. So that culture changed when we started benchmarking what the top employees are doing. So as soon as you started benchmarking what the top employees are doing, then the approach for the new guy is like, hey, welcome to the team. Look, we want your success to be easy. We're going to show you exactly how the top performers do it. You're going to duplicate that, so you're mimicking it until you've mastered it. So the new guy has to master the process before he starts making any kind of changes to the process.
Right.
Now, if he's mastered it and he can now find better ways, more efficient ways, we'll change the process for the whole organization because now he's the top. But it keeps changing it, and it makes it hard for somebody that wants to throw an idea on the table but can't really execute. They can't, it's not as it's open to ideas, but only from people that can actually do it, not from just everybody.
Anybody,
Yeah.
So I think that when you're small like you were, and I'm literally right next to you, right, watching you make the sauce.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, you need a little bit more cilantro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the mentality. But now, if you have grown, and sometimes I would genuinely question you. I'd be like, listen, I do not want to do whatever it is he just said. But now I'm like, you know what? Whatever he's doing or wherever he's getting this from, it is working. You know what I mean? So go against your whatever it is you got in your own head, right? And just try it, because now you see that it's working.
Yeah.
Right. When you see it's working, you're like, who am I to question somebody when whatever it is they're doing has gotten them this far? But yeah, very early on, I'd be like, dude, why do we have to do this or that? Or why do, like, for instance, the shirt and tie thing is a classic example. When I was so happy. I was like, all right, I'm in California. I'm never going to wear a shirt and tie again. But I thought everything was flip flops here. And you were so serious about it. Even the other customers would be like, why does he make you guys do that? I'm like, I don't know, but I swear to God, if you tell him, that I didn't have on a tie or something like that, because like one customer would take off your tie, I'd be like, dude, don't tell him. You know what I mean?
So they've always, and when I say they, I mean Joel and Ephraim, they had always taken that super seriously, to the degree that when I first started subcontracting, I wasn't even an employee yet, right? I first started subcontracting, so the company itself was them two and like one other full-time employee, right? And so I don't know if you remember this one time after I was working another job. So I came to Joel's house. You were there. I had just gotten off of work, so it was like 6 o'clock in the evening or whatever. I had scheduled to meet up with you guys after work, so I drove over to Joel's, just dressed like I was from the other job. It's just a company of 3 people at that point, right? I'm not even part of the company. I'm a subcontractor, and I walk in, and then the first thing Ephraim says, buddy, we really take the shirt and tie thing, and they're there in Joel's living room, in his living room, in a shirt and tie, and I'm like, oh man, like it wasn't a hassle for me, but in my mind, I'm like, it's not that big. But the company was so small, but they wanted the shirt and tie.
You want to hear something funny? So, same guy I went to lunch with today. So he's a DevOps guy for one of our big customers, and he's seen us do penetration. He's worked with us because he's a developer. We do the penetration testing, we show the risks, and then he's part of the team that's like working with us on the other end, fixing it, all that, having us retest all that kind of thing. So he's the guy that met with us, and when I sat down, he's like, oh man, he's like, so is the shirt and tie thing he's like, I noticed that's your guys' thing. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, every time I'm on a call, you guys are always dressed up and all of that. He's like, it's actually like, he's like, I think it's so different that we're not used to it. And I was like, well, what do you think about it? He's like, you guys stand out way different. We work with a lot of vendors. He's like, you guys are the only ones. And he's like, I know, I can tell you guys are. So he mentioned 2 things. He's like, you guys have like some kind of system on the back, right? Like, I'm like, yeah. He's like, I could tell because like when you guys are doing deliveries and stuff, it's like very systematic and everybody's dressed. And I'm like, he's describing our processes, our role play, and then obviously the looks. But the visible, like he complimented, so I'm actually going to throw that on the all hands. He actually was like, man, like you guys are different. Like everybody can tell as soon as we jump on a call with you guys that there's something different, and then you're like delivering on it. It's like man, you guys are like it just feels like you're in another league.
Yeah, it's so different. We had a sales call, a reverse sales call, where somebody was trying to sell to us.
Yeah.
And they were all very casual, which is nothing wrong with it, right? They were all just very casual, just like collared shirts or whatever. And one of the guys showed up to the meeting like 3 or 4 minutes late. And, you know, so I made a little joke to him about that. But I was just like, man, the vibe is different. Like, it almost seems to me like you feel like take it or leave it. You know what I mean? Because you're dressed however you wanted to dress. You kind of came in when you wanted to come in, right? When you have the experience of a Fit Solutions sales call, we're on the call before you're on the call. We're dressed. We address so many things in the beginning. We've had several people tell me and Melinda, like even if they don't buy, like listen, I've never actually seen like a duo work like you guys work through a sales process. It's just the delivery is just like you said, it's another league. You know what I mean? It's I think what you would consider like upper echelon.
Yeah.
I think just that alone, people feel like wow, if it's like this now, was it like doing that? You know, they always say the same thing. Wow, if this is really true, this is amazing. I've heard that several times from sales calls. So
Yeah.